Hello and welcome to another episode of Teaching Heroes, the teaching podcast where I ask educators, what's it like to turn up every day and teach tomorrow?
Just wait a minute, Joe.
What?
Bit of a different thing happening today. Remember, I'm hosting.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. That's right. This week it's actually special request week. I made it up on the spot. Special request week from the students. I got an email from Amelia saying, Joe, hey, I really want to hear about what it's like to be a mum and a teacher and all of the things that come up with. And I said, well, Amelia, if I'm the person who's being interviewed, I need a host. So you'll have to host.
Ready to go.
Here we are. All right. So over to you.
Into it. Over to me.
Okay.
So, Joe.
Yes.
Tell us about your whole teaching career, your whole experience, where you are now, where you started. I want to know.
Okay. So where I am now is I'm Deputy Head of Education based at Blacktown for ACU, and I'm also Academic Lead for Student Success in the Provost Office, which is a new role that has just come up, which is amazing, and I'm really enjoying it. And yeah, I've been at ACU for 12 years. Yeah, do I go right back to the beginning? Where do I go?
I think so. Let's go back.
Okay. Well, I'm from a family of educators, like teachers are the family business. I mean, I think I joke to you guys, throw a rock in a Catholic school in Sydney and you'll hit one of my cousins.
Yeah.
Like it's in the blood, and I resisted it actually for a while because I was really interested in drama, and I didn't know whether I would necessarily wanted to be an actor, but was working in community arts, and what I'd do in that role is teach young people drama. So in a lot of community arts organisations, I would, be a drama educator, and I really loved that. And eventually I decided, well, it's quite a good, being a casual teacher is really good money. So that's why I kind of went in and then did my dip ed. So I did my Bachelor of Arts honours in drama. I worked in television for a little bit and did community arts. And then, you're not earning that much money. And I thought, well, I'll go back and I'll do my dip ed and I'll get some money as a casual teacher. But then I found that I loved it. And then so became a drama English teacher.
Wow. So is that high school?
Yeah. So originally trained as a high school teacher, but I've always taught after school drama from, year 5, from 5-year-olds up to 80-year-olds really. Yeah. So I've had that kind of diverse experience. And my first teaching position actually was out in Yass in New South Wales at a central school, a Catholic school that taught from kindergarten to year 10. And so as part of that role, so while I was teaching drama and English in high school, when we did the school musical, it was, year 5 up to, year 10 as part of that school musical. So, my early experiences was still in that primary school phase. And then once I had kids, I started to do a lot more work in primary schools.
Well, that's really interesting that you mentioned your kids. So that's kind of what I wanted to speak to you about today, was your work to life balance whilst being a mum and, your whole education career. Like, how do you do that? Because I know I'm well away from that, but honestly, if I worry about something going into the profession, it is that being a mum and caring for my kids and my kids in the classroom.
Yeah. Yes, it's actually definitely when I had kids, it made me a better teacher from the get-go really, because I kind of started to understand the parental angst that comes out. So I admit, when I was a teacher, first off, my biggest struggle was with dealing with parents. I really struggled with that, and that was 15 years ago or something. So it's worse now than what it was back then in terms of like parents having such high expectations of the teachers, and when you don't fulfill on them, it felt like at the time, I was being attacked for my work, and as a beginning teacher, it was I took it very personally. And once I had kids, though, I could started to understand more where the parents were coming from. And because, you know, you're with this little human that you've grown in your belly for a mother, and a father, you've been, you know, there from the beginning of this child, and you've watched them grow, and you know so much about their little idiosyncrasies and everything, that then when you give them over to a teacher, it's quite a big thing. So I started to understand then what was behind a lot of parent angst.
Yeah.
And also I started to really realize, from a drama teacher point of view, how early kids start to play. And so I became really fascinated with that as well, that kids are just so naturally drawn to play. And then I started to look at the school curriculum and consider how little opportunities we give kids to play. So watching a child develop in front of your eyes, and then I have 3 kids and they're also unique, I started to kind of get really curious about child development and how the school curriculum, you know, could be improved, and how we as teachers could be improved too.
So with that, how do you ensure, because I personally, when I watch, have you seen the movie Freedom Riders?
Yes.
So that teacher, that female main lead, I can't think of her name at the moment, but I look at her, for anyone who doesn't know the backstory, she's a very passionate educator who goes into a high school and pretty much brings these children, and is so diverse and unique in the way she raises these children in their education, throughout their schooling careers. And her partner and her family is kind of like, you're putting too much effort in, you're doing this, you're doing that. And part of me looks at her and goes, she is such an inspiration that she does that, and she goes above and beyond. But then the other part of me is like, hang on a minute, is my family going to look at me and think that? Am I going to be the devil's advocate for myself and go, what about your family? What about your social life? What about your kids, most importantly, for the future? So I guess my question to you with that is, how do you make sure that you are not, for a lack of a better term, neglecting your children at home for your children in the classroom, staying up at late, planning lesson plans and things like that?
That's such a big, important question you're asking. And funnily enough, my coach says I remind him of that character in Freedom Riders. And he made me rewatch it again. And where do I start? I've always been so passionate about whatever I do, really, and about, originally drama education, was so passionate about it. And I could see, so when I first started, I was a year 9, like they only offered drama in year 9 and 10, and I would teach English from year 7 to 10. And so I just, off my own bat, started an after school drama club for year 7 and 8 students, because I saw the gap, and that was just, I didn't get paid for it. It didn't come off my workload or anything like that. I did it because I was just passionate about what drama could offer these, young people in Yass. And, and it was such an incredible, rewarding experience watching these students, grapple with Shakespeare. We did a little Shakespeare festival at the end of it, and, grapple with kind of this Shakespearean language, and just watch their parents be so incredibly amazed by their abilities, and looking at the other teachers, saw this whole new perspective of, who they were as students. And in fact, one of my best teaching moments was, because I didn't teach year 7 English, so I didn't know the year 7 students, in my after school drama club. I only just knew them from there, and had, selected these 2 girls to do the scene from Romeo and Juliet with the nurse and and Juliet, and this beautiful, gorgeous girl, woman now, played Juliet, and did this beautiful job. And it was just an incredible, highlight of the festival, this scene between the nurse and Juliet. And her English teacher came up to me afterwards and said, what did you do with that student? And I said, what do you mean? Kate, her name was, what did you do with Kate? It's like, what do you mean? She said, Joe, she's in remedial English. She can't even read. Like, she can't read.
Gosh.
How is she up there doing? And I was like, I don't know. I just gave her the script.
Wow.
And that was kind of, started another inquiry for me about what is it about. And I think, she was in a safe place. She was rehearsing, she wasn't required to just read this once. It was over and over again. She had me and the other teacher help her. She had a peer help her. So we just, didn't have any knowledge of her backstory. So just treated her just like all the other students. But it's that, I think there's something in poetry, blah, 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 blah. So, that's just kind of one example of what I've always done in my working life, is that because I love my job, I'm passionate about what I do. I do go to that nth degree and find avenues for myself to express what I want to express as an educator, because you can't always do that in the 9 to 3 job, right? Because you have certain expectations from the curriculum that you need to fulfill on, and you can push that so often. But as an early teacher, you don't have that much wriggle room perhaps to do everything exactly you want. So I just find these kind of pockets of places that I could express who I wanted to be as an educator. And so before kids, it didn't matter, right? It didn't matter. I was doing a billion things. I was in a theatre company. I was working. I was doing my PhD. It didn't matter, because the only person it impacted was me and my relationship with my, boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband. And so that impact wasn't there. But once I had kids, it was a real culture shock, I have to say, because no longer could I do that extra part, because I wanted to be, it's not a had to be, wanted to be at home with my children. And I will do a little shout out to ACU, because they have an excellent maternity leave policy, where I had a year's paid off to stay home and look after my children. So I could really indulge in that time with them without worrying about where my income was coming from. And then they also have a policy that until your youngest child is at school, you can request to work part-time. So up until the beginning of last year, I was working part-time most of the time. So I was able to really balance it beautifully, because I'd have my days at home with my children, I'd have my work, and then also because, and part of it, it's like you need the support network around you, because I had a really, still do have a very supportive husband who, encouraged me to still continue my theatre group. So I was, working, had my kids, and then as soon as they were old enough, I would, went back to my weekly rehearsals with my theatre group. So, it doesn't, it's not, you really have to have that support network around you. Otherwise, it would be really, really challenging to be able, for me to be able to pursue the things that I want to contribute to in society if I did not have that support network around me.
Yeah. So what do you say to kind of, as your personal take on people who may think that they cannot be a teacher in the classroom and be a successful parent necessarily? Like, how do you think that, because I know for me, although it's so far away, I'm 19 years old and thinking about those things. So obviously somewhere in my brain, since I've wanted to do teaching and be in the education system since I was 4. So somewhere in my brain, I have either seen something or I've had people communicate to me like this idea that I can't be one and be the other, like, which is interesting.
It's the kind of standard listening that society has of women, say, in this role. So there is, you just have to be responsible that that's the context that you're living in. So certain people in society have those views about what a mother is and what working is and what we should be allowed to do and when. And what I would say is that you have to is that you can be aware of it without letting it get you down. And in a way, you can kind of see it as a bit of a gift, right? That you're already thinking this at 19. Like, how can I be a great mum and a great, teacher, and without sacrificing both? Most likely, probably a lot of 19-year-old boys aren't thinking that. But let me tell you that when they become fathers, they will be thinking about that. And definitely the new generation of fathers who really want to be a part of their kids' lives, they have to battle that as just as much as women do, because it's just in a different context. And it's just, because they have to kind of say to their employers, hey, I want to be at home with my kid too. I want to work part-time, or I want to have Fridays off, or I want to stay home when my child's sick. It's just not on my, partner. And I realize I'm talking a bit about, heterosexual partners, and I know that there are different, different ways people have children, and people have them single, and all that's a whole different, as well. But I guess whatever context you're in, everyone has to have that difficult conversation at some stage. And I think that I think when I was younger, I was really reactive against that, very much about that's not fair, but life isn't fair, and everyone has that. Everyone has something that they're going to butt up against. So I would say that you don't have to listen to what other people are saying. And I think you can find your own way. And I would say that it takes a while for you to maybe, find your own feet there as well, because it's going to look different for everyone.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. I've never even considered, like, obviously I'm with the times, I've considered that as a perspective that, there's different parenting roles to what there used to be, but that had never crossed my mind. So thank you for that.
Yes,
Going back to what you said a little bit before about when you became a parent, you could understand from the teacher perspective why some of your students as parents were the way they were. How do you think, knowing that stuff now, how do you handle that? Like, what can you pass on to me as someone who isn't going to have that experience in my first couple of years of teaching? Like, what's the best way to deal with parents that without that perspective, I guess?
What would I say? I would say that it's that old saying of you never know what it's like to stand in someone else's shoes until you have done that. But also in part of that, there's a kind of knowledge that you can't actually stand in someone else's shoes. You can be aware of that other perspective, but you can never know what it's like for that other person to live their life. We can make assumptions and judgments, and they should be like this or they shouldn't be like that. But at the end of the day, all we can be aware of is that their experience of life is different to my experience of life, and that we have to kind of find a way to come together. I think with any parent, pushback, complaint, demand, and I think a lot of parents wouldn't even frame it like that. They wouldn't say that they're being demanding. I think a lot of them would just be saying that they're getting their rights, or they'll be coming at from that point of view. It's my right to know. And there's some truth to that. And it's kind of this balance of, it's actually not a bad thing that parents are more involved in a child's education. It's not a bad thing. It's just about managing the expectation of that parent to what is actually occurring in the classroom. And so I would say that any kind of parent interaction that you are finding difficult is to stand in the position of, there's something going on for that parent that I have no knowledge of, and also I know what I have the experience of being in education. I have my degree, so therefore what you know is what you know.
Yeah.
And also to see what you can learn from that interaction with the parent. So if a parent's being particularly demanding, difficult, or they're saying that you didn't treat their child right, I would take it from the point of view that doesn't mean that you're a failure as a teacher. It just means that there's a kind of expectation that hasn't been met. And it's just worth trying to find out, well, what can that parent offer you in reflection on your teaching? Because there might be something in what they say where you go, you know what, actually, if this happened again, I would do it as that parent is suggested.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you're a bad teacher. You know, we're all learning and we all learn all the time. I would also always, as a young teacher, you should have a mentor in your school anyway, but to find someone that you can, trust and be open with, so that they can help you in those interactions as well. And I think it's always important to be really honest about what you did, what happened in the classroom, without getting defensive about it, so that you can learn from it. And I think that is much more the practice, luckily enough, in schools nowadays, is that, mentors realise that young teachers in particularly, need that training. And so every opportunity is kind of a training opportunity in that. And also to consider that, so this is the other thing, kids at home are really different to what they're like in the classroom.
Yes.
So both parents and teachers need to understand that a child at home, child in the classroom might not be the same as they are at home. So it's really, important to have that open communication between both of you, so that you can be really open-minded. As my advice to parents, be very open-minded about how your child may be in the classroom, and also, to realise that you're the student that you're teaching. Just both those things, and to kind of have a conversation about that, and then find the teacher might have really good strategies that they're using in the classroom that you can then adopt at home as a parent, and vice versa. So the parent might have a strategy that they're working with that might then help the child in the classroom. And that's one of the things. So with my kids experience anxiety, we had to say to the parents, we get that our child talks a lot, but he's going to respond better to positive feedback than he is negative. And luckily enough, our kids go to a fantastic school, and they've always been really open, and we've been able to have really kind of honest, open conversations about the best way, for our kids to learn in that classroom.
Yeah, I guess that's another point you've just raised is how do you, as an educator with this much experience as a teacher, as an educator, as an academic, how do you approach your children's education with regards to a teacher who you might feel needs to be doing something different for your child's needs? Like, how do you go in going, I'm a teacher, I know this, how do you possibly approach that?
I think it's from that point of view that I just accept that my child in the classroom could be different. So I always take the expertise of the teacher above mine, even though, so there's been quite a few times where I would have been like, I wouldn't have treated that situation. So for me, I've been really open with you guys about saying I don't agree that I don't agree with playtime being taken off as a punishment, right? Yeah. Because I think it just goes against teachers. Teachers then don't get a break. The kids don't get a break. It's better to find another. I'm not, that child should definitely be punished for something they did wrong, absolutely, or they need a consequence for their action. I think so, but
I agree.
But that's the school we go to. Sometimes they use that policy, and I just have to accept that I can never know the whole context of that school and the best way it operates. So I just have to say, okay, well, this is the school I've chosen. I have to, respect the policies of the teachers, and occasionally I suggest things, but I more suggest things to do with the parenting of my child, because that's the only the expertise that I offer. It is sometimes challenging because I also volunteer at the school a lot. So it can be, I go, I wouldn't do it like that. But then I always go, well, I don't know the whole picture. I don't know the whole picture of how the school operates. And what I do actually is try as best as I can to educate the parents around me about why the school would do a certain policy or not, and try and explain the background context of that, so that and actually my kids' school is really good at doing that. The principal's really good at explaining policies to teachers, and I think a lot of schools could take on some of that more, because I feel like sometimes schools are very reactive to parents and give parents what they want, whereas sometimes I think if they just explained the reasons behind some of their educational decisions, they would
I saw that on prac, like a few of the things they've been speaking at. I was placed in obviously first prac. I was in a year 3 classroom, and the children had their first ever overnight camp at Taronga Zoo.
Oh, really?
2 days later, they did parent-teacher conferences. So it was very interesting when the kids were, the parents had been told, I'm so sorry, my dog.
That's your dog. I was like, what is that?
I was like, back legs jumping up in a minute. She wants to be included in everything.
Become.
But what I was going to say was that my experience of the school had said to the parents, because they were leaving afternoon after school to make that trip to Taronga Zoo, and teachers had said it is best for your children that you don't come and say goodbye to your children, like they need to and so what had happened was all my kids in my class, all of year 3, had gone to the hall, and I was still in the classroom marking my books from the Children's Day, and I had parents knocking on the door, peeping through the windows, going, "You're not the normal teacher, where's the kids, we need to say goodbye." And I had been told by my supervising teacher to tell these parents, you're not allowed to see the kids. You're not allowed to see the kids. So I was relaying information. It was and it was a very eye-opening experience that was like, that's challenging. But then again, I can really see that these children aren't just students that I'm placed with for 10 days. These are like, I'm with these kids, and their parents obviously have been informed that there's a placement teacher at the school, whether that's through school or whether that's through the kids coming home going, "Miss Burge, we've got this new Miss Burge." Like, but it was just so interesting for me to like recap on what you're saying, how like I didn't really understand, like, why can't these parents just, they were told not to come, why do they have to come? And then it was me realizing some of these parents have never been away from their children for a night before.
Like year 3, so
year
little.
3, I know. I was like, wow, I didn't go until year 5.
Little,
Anyway, moving on the conversation a little bit, it kind of relates to this, but I want to talk about switching off as a teacher, which kind of relates to, switching off from the teacher role to the parent role. But I guess for me, I'm noticing, like, even just through that experience on prac, I really struggle to switch off and not constantly self-reflect. Am I being the educator that a 4-year-old Amelia has envisioned for us? So switching off, how can you do that? Like, how does that happen?
I think that I think it's about, in terms of your relationship with the kids, it's really important to really like kind of locate what that relationship is. So you're a teacher educator in the classroom with them from 9 to 3, and hopefully, they'll learn to read and count by the end of year 6, really, and be nice to others. And so your role is to facilitate that in the best that you can. And also, more and more, we are required to kind of be aware of, kids' safety as well. So how can we support this child, not just within the classroom, but to ensure that they're getting the support that they need at home? But also within that, there's a boundary. We can only kind of go so much. And definitely as a classroom teacher, just on the student safety thing, obviously you refer things to your mentor or your principal, things that you care about. But it is hard because you tend to really connect, and we want you to connect to the students in your classroom on that personal level, because you're going to get the best educative outcomes if you go in there with a kind of, loving relationship with them. And so I think it's kind of realizing what are the limits of your role, and then knowing that you can only do so much. And also there's nothing wrong with that reflecting either. Reflecting's a good thing. You just want to do it from, as I was saying before, from the area of performance. Okay, so what did I actually do? Not what I felt. What did I do? how did the students respond? What was the outcome, and was it effective or not? Did it meet the syllabus outcomes? Or you might have had an outcome that day to go, you know what, we just really need a day where we're connecting. So by the end of the day, you want, 20 smiling faces and everyone's had a kind of productive, engaged day. That might be your meter that day. And so to really look at it from the point of view, okay, what did I do? What did I go? What could I do next time? And then to just leave it at that.
I'm going to write that down, because like especially that, like reflecting on performance and not on emotions, because I am very much, how did I feel about that? Like it's very me centered, I guess.
Yeah. That's a really good point for you to realize, is that how often we kind of indulge in a way in that feeling, and that's the part that can be really counterproductive, that your feelings actually matter to, how much they actually matter in that. You want to look at it in terms of, well, I feel really bad about that lesson. You go, okay, well, why do I feel bad? What was the expectations not met, or did I have an interaction with the student I wasn't happy with? And then it's like, okay, just knowing that anything can be resolved in communication with your students. So and we do sometimes don't have the best interactions with students that we're proud of as an adult. We can always go back the next day and say, hey, I'm sorry about that interaction that we had. Wow. This is what I should have said, and let's move forward. And then it's easier to switch off, because once you've kind of made the resolution and acted on it, then you can let it go. I think that's the other thing as an early teacher as well. You can not be happy with what you've done, and then if you don't do something to correct it, then you're going to hold on to it. Then you're going to, if you're not brave enough to step out and do something about it, then you're going to keep thinking about it. Once you've done something to resolve it, then you're more able to let it go. And it's not saying that like it's easy. Sometimes it does take a reflection to your mentor to say, hey, that lesson yesterday was not great. The students, jumping on the chairs, and I didn't know what to do. And it's hard to admit that.
Because I know for me, like on prac, my feedback from my supervising teacher, like verbally by the end of it, was, Amelia, I can tell you're going home, you're thinking about these lessons so much. The content, the way you're teaching, everything you're doing is perfect. It's just making sure that as Stephanie is learning how to read time, she's not swinging on her chair while she's doing it. Like, she kind of said to me, you've got it, but it's now the supervision, the classroom management, the behavior, and not stressing so much on the content and things like that. So and it's really like this fine balance, because you get the I hate the word classroom management, but I know what you mean. Let's just stay with it. But that kind of classroom management side really is about how good your relationships are with the students in your classroom. And depending on where you're teaching, that could take a really long time for you to build up, and that's okay. And, in another podcast episode I did interviewing Karen Young, the psychologist, she was saying it takes time for those relationships to build up. And particularly you guys on prac, I know that first prac's 10 days. There's no way you can build up a proper relationship with those students in 10 days. There's no way. The best you can do is turn up and be friendly and open and look students in the eye. Other than that, you've got no time to do anything. That was it. That was it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm terrible with names, and when I got their names, I'm like, that's an achievement in itself. Like,
absolutely. Yes.
But it's just been interesting, and going back to what you've said before about reflecting on your performance. I know something for me that I'd love for you to comment on, because I know you in EDFX in our learnings have spoken about building the professional learning network. But on the flip side, and kind of the negative side of a professional learning network, I am constantly comparing myself to the teachers that I see on social media. And I just think it has, like, I will sit down, I will have my cup of tea, and I'm ready to end the day, and I'll scroll on Instagram and see some teacher who has done this massive bulletin board with beautiful colours that she spent her own time and money on. And I'm just like, up I go again. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like what's your advice to not get so caught up in what other teachers are doing, whether that's on social media or in the staff room?
Yeah.
How?
All my classes with drama students, it's just me and them in the classroom. Like, I don't have any resources at all, ever. I don't use props. I don't use sets, nothing. It's just me and them in a circle. I don't need any of that, bulletin boards or anything like that. And I respect that it's a different subject, right? So it's not, there's place for that, and it's great. There's nothing wrong with it. But also, I know my gift as an educator, and the thing that I would encourage all of you to work on more is about relationships with the students. So, and that is why I believe I am good at what I do, is because I have learnt the skills to be able to get into really close relationship with students in a really short amount of time. And every now and again, I go and test myself and go to a school I've never been in before, in challenging parts of Sydney, and run and see, oh, well, let's see, can I run this same 40-minute drama lesson, for example, in this classroom without having it? And generally I can, right? Because I've learned because it's years of practice, and I've just learnt those skills about being in relationship, and so that's what I would say. I wouldn't get up and try and spend hours at night trying to build a fancy bulletin board or a fun, engaging app, or that's not what I would be spending your time on. What I would encourage you to spend your time on is who are you being in the world, and what are your relationships like? So I would just be looking, what's my relationship like with my parents? What's my relationship like with my brothers and sisters? What's my relationship like with my friends? How can I ensure that all these relationships are healthy, sustaining, beautiful relationships? Work on that, because that's what you're going to bring into the classroom.
So true.
So often, you know, I would find that I would have a difficult relationship with a student, and then I'd think back and I go, oh, this student reminds me of my relationship with this friend.
Yes.
So you go, okay, well, how would I resolve? You know, you bring your past into the classroom all the time. So you kind of have to resolve that, you know, that's what I would be working on. You know, I wouldn't be spending hours trying to find the perfect lesson on the internet, because it just doesn't exist, you know. The best teachers are the ones that definitely organise, right? So I'm not saying you can go in there and just like laissez-faire, like
as long as the kids are happy, like no,
like my lessons are like timed to the minute. You know, I know exactly what I'm going to do when, and what my expectations are, and what's the outcome. So, you know, it's all planned 100%. But what I'm working on more is how do I bring that, how do I ensure that the classroom that I'm creating is collaborative? How can I ensure that and the only way I can do that is if I'm a collaborative person in my life.
Yeah.
So am I a collaborative person with my friends and in my family? Am I a collaborative colleague? Then I can foster that into the classroom.
I think that's so true with what you're saying. And I definitely, like, kind of talking about personal values per se coming into the classroom, I definitely saw that on prac. Like, I envision, and my big moral compass surrounds kindness and compassion and courage. And I definitely saw the second I was given an opportunity to PE lesson, I went straight in for that. Like, and that was when I felt most confident, when I could give the children in year 3 those lessons on treat people the way you want to be treated, like things like that. Like, so it's really interesting that you say that that is so important.
And really look at the difficult relationships you're having in the classroom too. You know, you're not going to like everyone in your classroom, but you should definitely love them. And the way we love everyone in the world is by just realizing the humanity of the people in your classroom. What are they dealing with at home? What is the context in which they live in? And just be really interested is the other thing in all of them, because you do find there are definitely kids who you are drawn to, and you think they're like, you're so interested in them, they make you laugh, or, I find, one of the things I reflect on is, like, I find energetic boys really like, and always have, really inspiring to work with in the classroom. So it's kind of no doubt that that's what I've raised, actually, is two, now that I'm thinking about it, two very energetic boys, because that's, I kind of love that energy. It feeds me. But I always have to make sure then, well, who am I? I have to make sure that my attention is on all of them, you know, like not just them, but like what are the quiet girls doing, for instance, or how can I bring, you know, even respect what they're bringing in the classroom, because that's the other thing. When I interviewed my old supervisor, you know, it's what his beautiful metaphor was saying, that you, as a teacher, you walk into the classroom and everyone has half empty glasses, you know, everyone's a half empty glass, and we continue to fill each other's. So think of it like that, like I'm filling the cups of the students, but they're also filling my cup. I'm also learning from them. And if you kind of go in with that, you know, partly that teaching is an exchange between both of you, it's not just you dumping all the content, you know, that might start to open your eyes too. You know, if you're so worried, I want to teach them time, but you're not open to what they have to offer you, then that's when the behavior goes, you know, isn't going the way that you want it to.
And it's really interesting, because I think the lessons, when I reflect on my practical experience, I think the lessons that were most successful were the lessons when I would, like the PDHP lesson, where they could pick what side of the room they wanted to go to, whether they agreed or disagreed, and we'd have a discussion. And we'd
great. Yeah,
that was the best ever, because it was just like, wow. But yeah, it's been a really great experience, like having you and everything like that, and I'm just so grateful.
Can I ask, like, what made you ask, you know, is it just something that you've always thought about? You know, what is it, you know, how do you manage your career and family? Or I kind of wondered where the question came from.
Well, I don't have any teachers in my family. So I don't have any teachers in my family, and I have a little girl who has known at preschool, I'm going to be this, and this is all I'm going to be. And so, but then, you know, realizing that, hang on a minute, I want to be a mum as well. And I think they've been my two things. And so growing up, it's kind of been like, I am so passionate about this one thing. I'm so tunnel visioned towards being a teacher at final end game that I just start to think, wait, hang on a minute. Am I giving enough attention to everything? And then I start freaking out, because if my mindset has been so like this for so long, how am I going to change that if my children suddenly need me? And, you know, like, it just makes me a bit excited, but also a bit like, ooh.
See, one of the sayings I used to say was like, you can't have it all. You can have it all, but you can't have it all at once. So that was kind of used to be my saying, right? That there are times in your life where, and I guess I still believe it, there are times in your life where your career is at the forefront, and there are going to be times in your life where parenting is at the forefront. And I would still say this is the case, particularly when the child is really young. So if you decide you're the primary caregiver, so whoever the primary caregiver is, so the one who's going to be at home with the baby, then you know, that is what you should tend and grow and nurture. And there'll be times where your career is your focus. But I think now, and it's still, I'm still like this about it, but now I've found that way to have it all. And the way I've done that for me is through having a kind of a coach or like a mentor that I can like talk through these things with and be very open and frank with. And that's what I would encourage. And I was reflecting on it with a friend, she's a lawyer. We were talking about how there's not that much space. I don't know whether it's just a female thing, it could be a male thing as well, but there's not much space within workplaces, and it's changing, to have a kind of mentor that is looking after your whole self, right? Where they're kind of inputting not just your career, but inputting in that balance. And so that's been kind of helpful for me at times where I've gotten really excited about work, when my coach is saying, so how's your relationship with your kids going? So I've been able to kind of go, okay, you know, what do I have to just like adjust a little bit. And I think I've had the most success in the last year by having somebody like that to kind of push me career wise. So I've, and also manage that, beautiful relationship at home with my children and my husband too. So, and my family and my friends, because that's the one thing I would say I sacrificed for quite a number of years, was that relationship with my friends. Because I just didn't have time. That's how I perceived it, was that I didn't have time. I had my husband, I had my kids, I had my job, I had my theatre group, and that's it.
Yeah.
But I've since learned things like, it's so stupid, but just things like calling my friends. So I make sure that during the week now, I call a couple of my girlfriends and just have a phone conversation. So novel, Amelia, so novel. But just to, make sure that everything is being tended to, and that's just made work better.
I can imagine. Wow. It's been so great to hear. Like, I haven't had anyone to ask. That's the thing. Like, I couldn't just go to my supervising teacher. So what's it like?
I'm sure they would love it. I reckon next time you should ask and just say, can we just have a talk about how you manage your life and your teaching? Because everyone would have a different experience as well, and everyone has different goals and what they want to achieve. And so, definitely ask. I think we need to ask these questions more about what does success look like for us, and in the family, in the home, in the family, at work, with our friendships. What does it look like for us as a whole person? I think they're really important questions we need to keep asking. So I was so excited when you said it, and I was like, wow, that would make a good podcast.
Thank you. I mean, what can I say? It's just something that I think you're right in saying, that it's questions that I think eventually all of us are going to want to ask, but it's just about who we ask them to.
Yeah, and I think it's like whoever you ask, you take the advice and you either adopt it or you don't, and don't feel like you have to. Definitely, you have opinions on your parenting, on how you work all the time, not just mothers. I think it's a bit more intense with mothers, but there's always going to be comments around how you parent and how you do your work, and at the end of the day, you're the one that has to. It's your life, and it's your relationship with your kids. And if you think that's helped, and that was always my barometer. It's like sometimes you get comments, and I look at my relationship, really try as much as possible objectively with my kids and go, okay, what is my relationship with my kids like at the moment? It's like, actually, it's pretty good. So, I don't have to, and sometimes I'm like, okay, I could, play dollies with my daughter for a bit longer. That's what I did yesterday. Half a day playing dollies. And it was just like so beautiful for both of us. So, just checking in with yourself and being honest with yourself, and not, putting guilt on yourself all the time. It's just about, okay, I haven't spent enough time with her, so now I will, and then it's
wow. I'm just wow. One more question that's a little different to our topic, but it's something that my friends, when I told them, I enjoy, they were like, can you please ask her this?
Go.
The benefits of postgraduate study aside from the learning opportunities.
Well, this is like, another episode, but look, we have a chronic shortage of practicing teachers in academia. So it's actually one of my goals as deputy head at Blacktown, is to increase postgraduate participation from teachers. And also, this isn't just, my vision thing. This is the vision, in fact, of, TEXA, which is the governing body for all universities, really want there to be more practicing teachers in the classroom. Now, in saying that, I still consider myself as a practicing teacher. I go into schools very regularly, and I definitely don't think I'm in my ivory tower removed from schools at all. And I would say that's true for the majority of my colleagues, if not all. However, there is something to offer recent school experience, to the university. So there is definitely a benefit for us in academia to have that, and to have more diverse voices in postgraduate study. It also is, I think all study there is just something very delicious about spending time doing some high order thinking around who you are as an educator, who you are as a human, all of those things. And it's one of the great joys of my recent role in the provost office, because we're talking about student success, and me and my colleague, we're just having these great conversations about what does success look like. And I'm really enjoying this space to really think high order, thinking. Yeah. And there are some really great educators out there, some of whom I've interviewed on the podcast, who really are deeply thinking about their teaching and what that means. So it will make you a better teacher as well, doing that postgraduate study. And also think about the benefits that you will then give back to the education force. So the more research we have in this area from practicing teachers, the better we will be. I loved my years doing the PhD. It was the best. I don't regret it at all. So obviously I'm biased, and it's not for everyone, and it should be encouraged for those that do want to do things like PhDs or even things like Masters of Educational Leadership. Those definitely is worth spending the time really thinking deeply about education, and we need more of it. So
wow, well, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Yes.
It has definitely been very eye-opening, and I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure everyone watching would have too.
Thank you, Amelia. You've been fantastic. I should get you in. We should co-host, I think. We co-host another episode. We get some teachers in, and then I can give the old crusty perspective, and you can give the new.
Yeah, I'd love to. That'd be awesome.
Let's find some principals and interview some principals.
Let's do it.
That's a good idea. Okay, thank you. This has been another great episode of Teaching Heroes with my new co-host, Amelia. We'll see you all next week for another episode. Bye.
Bye.